from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, fully vaccinated, now what? Joining us to talk more about it is Dr. Mark Rupp. Dr. Rupp is a professor and chief in the Division of Infectious Diseases at UNMC. Thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Kathy, it's such a great pleasure to be back on the program now in person.
In person indeed. Hey, I want to start by asking you to tell us, what does it mean to be fully vaccinated?
Well, we regard people as fully vaccinated 2 weeks after they receive the last dose of their regimen. So for the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, that's 2 weeks after the second shot. For people getting the J&J vaccine, it's a one and done, one shot regimen. So 2 weeks after that first shot, then they are fully vaccinated.
Okay, and what percentage of Nebraskans fall into that category?
Of fully vaccinated,
Yeah.
we're approaching 50%. It's not quite there yet, but we're getting right around half the population has been vaccinated. So I think we need to celebrate this as a real success. And when you think about the fact that just a little over, 15 months ago or so, we had hardly heard of this illness, completely unknown to medical science. Now we have a vaccine and we've administered over 200 million doses throughout the country.
I was going to ask you, how does Nebraska compare to the states around?
Well, we're doing about average. We're doing fairly well. And so when you look at different populations, particularly in the older, more vulnerable population, we've done tremendously well. And I think that's really reflected in the falling hospitalization rate. So, we've vaccinated somewhere near 85% or higher of those over 65 years of age. And then as you get into the younger populations, we've done a little bit less well. And then obviously we've just opened up vaccination to those who are 12 to 16 years of age, and so those numbers are still a little bit low, but coming up fairly quickly.
Okay, and let's look at the U.S. and talk about the rest of the world, Dr. Rupp. How does that look? How should we be feeling, other than pretty fortunate, obviously, at this time? What's the rest of the world look like?
We should be feeling very fortunate to be citizens of the United States, where we've been able to really dedicate billions and billions of dollars to vaccine discovery, to development, to distribution, to the delivery of vaccine. And as as we've related, over 50% of the population now being vaccinated. Tremendously effective. This is reflected in the dramatic fall in the number of cases throughout the U.S. Unfortunately, that's not the same story across the globe. And so certain countries, Brazil, India, many areas of Latin America, probably most of Africa, are in a much different situation where they might only have 1 or 2% of their population vaccinated, and they're being subjected to really widespread outbreaks at this point, really stressing their societies, stressing their healthcare systems. And what people have to understand is that we should be pushing for vaccination across the globe, that an outbreak somewhere in the world with this virus can lead to a mutant strain that could be less susceptible to the vaccine, or more transmissible, and we've seen those already emerge, but it's possible that something more dangerous could occur in those other parts of the world and could set us back if we're unlucky.
Is that possible, Dr. Rupp, to do what you're suggesting, to try to kind of work our way out now and help some of those other countries, areas get what they're needing so that people are covered and we're not having to worry as much back here in terms of what could happen as a result?
Well, absolutely. And I think that we need to look at this in two different ways. We need to look at it, one, in a altruistic sort of way. How do we help fellow human beings throughout the world? But we also need to think about it, as I've already related, of protecting ourselves. Because if we can get everybody vaccinated, get this pandemic squashed down to the lowest level possible across the globe, then everywhere turns a lot safer, including us.
Okay, well, on the CDC just recently, because of those people who are fully vaccinated, and for those of you watching, take a look at this graphic. So they have updated the recommendations for folks. And so, Dr. Rupp, I'd like you to walk us through that, if you would.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And so the first thing to notice is that this reflects how effective the vaccine has been. So people who are vaccinated, we've shown that it really does prevent both infection as well as asymptomatic illness. And so people who are fully vaccinated can really start to resume most of the activities that they enjoyed prior to the pandemic. So it's okay to get together with your family and friends and have gatherings both indoors and outdoors. You can start to travel again, both domestically as well as in some cases internationally, although that is still suggested that you refrain from that unless it's really vitally important. And then for people who have been vaccinated, if they do potentially get exposed, they don't have to immediately go into quarantine and get tested, but we do recommend that if they start to develop any kind of symptomatic illness, that they would get tested. And in certain situations, we would want to test them routinely anyway. So somebody who worked in a healthcare facility or worked in some sort of a congregate living facility, they would want to get tested routinely after being exposed. So for all these reasons, it really reflects how effective the vaccine is and gives people, pretty free license to start doing those things that we've craved all so much during the pandemic.
Okay, and this is what they're suggesting we just continue to do. Walk us through that.
Correct. So fully vaccinated people should continue to get tested if they experience symptoms. And what it really indicates is that the vaccine is not 100% effective. Although it's nearly 100% effective in preventing really serious illness, hospitalization, and death, people can still get sick, they can still spread the virus, and therefore if they develop symptoms, they really do need to get tested. And then obviously local jurisdictions vary from place to place a little bit. Businesses may vary in some of their recommendations, and so obviously you have to follow those local laws and customs and regulations depending upon where you work or where you go to school or what your local health department is dictating.
Okay, and overall though, news fairly promising, right? Was looking the other day, Kaiser Family Foundation doing a study indicating that 13% of adults will likely not opt for the vaccine, and the number one reason seemed to be because they thought it was too new. So if we have anybody watching who shares that belief, what would you say to them? Well,
this is such a shame that people are being held back sometimes by misinformation, sometimes by their pre-existing fears of vaccination or other medical treatments. The vaccine was developed quickly, okay, so let's just get that out in the open because we needed to. We don't have the years and years of follow-up information that can be required when a routine vaccination comes forward to the FDA. So full transparency, yes, the vaccine got developed quickly, but they didn't cut corners in the safety of the vaccine. And so we really did do large, randomized, placebo-controlled, well-done, rigorous studies involving tens of thousands of persons. before this received the emergency use authorization. Now again, we didn't follow those people for years because we just didn't have time to do that. But now at this point, months and months since we had the emergency use authorization, we've given over 200 million doses of these vaccines throughout this country. And the gathering of data, the watching of those people and observing them month over month has been very rigorous. And so people are aware that, you know, there are a few reports of some side effects or toxicity that have evolved after millions of doses have been administered. So I think people should be reassured that, number one, safety was looked at very rigorously, and since then we've given hundreds of millions of doses. We do know what the side effect and the toxicity profile look like, and the system has worked. And so for those very, very rare things that have been uncovered, we know about those. Now we can also look at previous vaccines, and we know that from prior vaccination that if you're going to see a problem with a vaccine, you generally will see that within the first weeks or first months of experience. Now again, we've been giving vaccines since late in 2020. Here we are in the middle of 2021. We've passed that timeline of weeks to months. We are pretty sure of what we're up against here.
Okay, and for those people who say, you know what, I think I was probably exposed to that somewhere along the line, maybe I wasn't feeling very well, so I don't really need it. Or the people who are saying, I don't really know what's in it, right? Or it's not effective. Because we have been throwing this information out to folks, the right information, but there are still people who, for whatever reason, are saying, just not for me. Is there a last ditch that you would give somebody like that, Dr. Rupp?
Well, sure. I think that, again, look at the information, look at it as transparently as possible. And I think that people, if they look at this information, try to divorce themselves from some of the social media buzz that's out there and really go to a trusted source of information. It's been incredibly transparent. Look at the information. Look at the fact that if you get COVID-19, you have a real risk of having serious disease, hospitalization, in a small number of people, death. And this is particularly true amongst younger, healthier people. But even younger, healthy people can have the long hauler syndrome, where we see people who, otherwise don't have medical problems, may have had a relatively mild case of COVID-19 and are plagued for months, maybe permanently, we just don't have that longitudinal experience, of the brain fog, the cognitive problems. They just aren't thinking as clearly as they used to. They don't have as sharp as memory. They can't perform cognitively as well as they did prior to getting ill. The chronic fatigue, the low-grade fevers, the aches and pains, these are the things that are keeping people from going back into the classroom, going back into the workplace, that can be prevented with the vaccine. And so again, we know this vaccine works, incredibly effective in the studies, and then in real world situations, both here in the U.S. and everywhere it's been looked at, these vaccines are amazingly effective in preventing serious illness, hospitalization, death, the long hauler syndromes that I've been talking about, and really help to get society back on its feet. So I would just plead with people to really take advantage of the information that's available, look at it in a dispassionate way, try to evaluate it as clearly as you possibly can, divorce yourself from some of that hysteria that's out there, and do what's right. And the thing that's right is you want to protect yourself, you want to protect your family and your loved ones, and you also want to help society and help our country get back on its feet and get through this pandemic. And then the last thing I would mention is that there are people who have done everything they can, who've been vaccinated fully, but unfortunately may not respond to the vaccine. And so these are our most elderly, frail people, as well as our immune suppressed persons. And so it's our responsibility to protect them by forming that protective bubble around them, that so-called herd immunity. So for all those reasons, people should really step up, get the vaccine for those correct reasons.
Well, and I'm glad that you addressed that, because I wanted to ask you about what we've been hearing, that third shot, the need for a third shot, and you described those populations, but could you do that again for people who maybe aren't able to just stop at the 2, but have to look beyond that?
Sure. So again, the studies that were done very rigorously purposefully excluded immunosuppressed patients. So there, a smaller group of patients, and when you're trying to figure out if a vaccine works, there are exclusion criteria. And so those people really weren't studied. It was only when we started giving the vaccine on a more widespread basis did we realize that certain groups of folks who are immunosuppressed, so they might be on cancer chemotherapy, they might be on immunosuppressive drugs after having an organ transplant. There's also immune modulating drugs that are used in people with inflammatory bowel disease, sometimes rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis. There's a whole bunch of diseases where we're using powerful medications that really help their baseline disease, but also make them immunosuppressed. Those people may not respond to the vaccine as rigorously as somebody who's younger and healthy, and therefore remain at risk for getting COVID-19. Now, we really don't know the answer of whether giving a third dose will help those people or some other programmatic booster dose. So those are the things that are being looked at, and frankly, we just don't know enough about this right now to make those firm recommendations.
Okay, and one of the other questions that people, especially those who've not been vaccinated, might be asking, and if you could just kind of go over this again, would be the potential side effects of the vaccine?
Well, again, I think we need to really go into this fully transparently. And so most people who get the vaccine are going to have a sore arm. And it can be pretty sore for a day or two. And there's a smaller minority of people, less than 50%, who will have some sort of a systemic side effect. This is the immune system working. So people can feel some low-grade fevers, a little bit of tiredness, some fatigue, just some malaise. And that's, again, relatively common, 20, 30%, something like that in each of those categories. But they're self-limited. They're mild symptoms that typically would go away within a day or two. And when you look at those symptoms compared to the real risk from COVID-19, the risk-benefit ratio is clear. And so the benefit of giving the vaccine far, far, far outweighs the risk of getting COVID-19 and having normal disease. Now, we also talked about those people who may have had COVID-19 several months ago, and so they've put off getting the vaccine thinking, oh, I've had the illness, I'm protected, my immune system should be mounting a response, and so I'm protected from this disease. Now, that's kind of spotty, quite frankly, and so we know some people get illness, and they may have low levels of antibody that they form that might wane fairly quickly. And so we have clearly seen people who have been ill with documented COVID-19 and then get a second infection 2 or 3 months down the road. Now, it's relatively rare, but again, it happens. And we also know that some folks are going to wane fairly quickly over time, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And so they need to get the vaccine as well. And so people who have had illness and get even a single dose of vaccine have a really brisk booster response to that. So I would say even if you don't want to go through the 2-dose regimen, at least get 1 dose.
Okay.
And then, if you go through it with only mild side effects, then hey, it's a whole lot easier to get that second dose as well.
Okay. Another thing that we've heard out there, and we're going to go into some myths here, although I don't know, blood types. If you have a certain blood type, you're more immune to something than another.
We don't fully understand that, but there is some information out there to suggest that people who are blood type O are less likely to get severe disease than the other blood types. So we don't fully understand that immunologic makeup, but obviously it's a marker for how people respond and react to COVID-19. Again, there's a lot about this disease that we don't fully understand. That's one of those things.
Well, and medical professionals, especially, I would imagine, you're wanting to get the right information out there, but you're up against some sources that aren't quite so credible. And I know social media has probably played havoc on what you guys are trying to get accomplished. Talk a little bit about that and your battle with the sources that aren't quite as reliable.
Well, social media can be a really strong force for both good and bad. And so it is a way to get information disseminated. It really does level the playing field. So people have a megaphone, and they can use it for both good and for bad. The good is getting accurate information out there. The bad is having hysteria spread, fear spread, having inaccurate information that promotes the fear and the hysteria. And Lord knows, I've seen it all. I mean, I've heard of all kinds of things, from everything of microchips being placed into the vaccine, the whole sterility issue, vaccine shedding, that there's some mysterious thing that vaccinated people shed that influence other people. I mean, there's all kinds of very fringe kind of arguments out there that get amplified on social media. Normally, these wouldn't see the light of day, but again, sometimes where they've been put out on social media, they get amplified and really given a lot more credence than they should. Now, the other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is there are folks out there for nefarious purposes that actually manipulate the social media. And folks are starting to hear more about that, with manipulation of elections, doing a lot of things in our society that are really trying to undermine us, whether it be hacking the pipeline, turning off the power grid, what have you. So there's a lot of folks out there who are utilizing these IT tools and social media to make us argue with one another when we really shouldn't be arguing about anything. So they really want controversy to exist when there is no controversy. They want people to be afraid of the vaccine, not take it, when they really should be welcoming the vaccine. And so also some of these folks who are manipulating the social media don't really care if we get vaccinated or not. They just want to tear apart our democracy. And the best way to do that is to get us fighting with one another over all kinds of things, having the polarity increase. And I think folks need to understand that this anti-vaxxer thing is just one more place where they can drive a wedge between people in the United States and help to undermine our society.
Well, you've heard everything, I'm sure, from where you sit. If there were one single thing that you could draw out to put the kibosh on right now, dispel that myth, would there be one, Dr. Rupp, that if you could just get it out there that is not true, and please just, proceed?
Well, there's a lot of them. I don't know if there's just one, quite frankly, but I think the fear that people have of vaccination in general, and the fact that this is somehow some sort of unnatural poison or something that we're putting into our bodies that somehow has, detrimental effects down the road. What we're really doing is using very natural systems. So we're using people's immune systems to really see just a little piece of the virus so that we're primed and we're ready to respond if we ever encounter the virus in real life. I mean, the way I, kind of try to explain the immune system and vaccination is to equate it to having a security guard outside your home to prevent home invaders, okay? So your immune system is the guard. And it's there, it's got a sidearm, it's pretty attentive. And so it encounters an invader and it's able to respond. Now, by giving a vaccine, all we're doing is we're training your guard to be extra attentive, to have a loaded sidearm and to be ready to respond on a moment's notice. Now, if you have an immunosuppressed system, your guard has fallen asleep and unfortunately allows the invaders to come into your home. And if you have an autoimmune disease, your guard's trigger happy. And so it's kind of shooting in the dark and sometimes hitting the target and sometimes not. So giving the vaccine is really just simply training your guard, getting them armed, prepped, educated, ready to roll at a moment's notice. And that's what I would tell people, is that, the vaccine is nothing to be really frightened of. It's something that is a tool to help you stay healthy. And
there's plenty of it available for folks. Talk again about the process for those people watching this program and thinking, okay, he's gotten me over the hurdle here, and now I want to move forward, because we've been hearing, obviously, with the numbers going up of people fully vaccinated, there might be a little bit of pullback now, but people can still get vaccinated. So talk about
absolutely.
The process. Yeah.
No, I want people to join the group of us who are vaccinated, the healthy, happy folks who are able to go and do all the social interactions that we've all been craving to do. So vaccine is very readily available. You can go to lots of pharmacies. The public health clinics are still set up. But the transition needs to occur sometime in the near future where the vaccine goes to people rather than people going to the vaccine. And so we need to work harder on making it much more convenient for folks to get vaccinated in their places of work, the places they go to school, just as convenient as we possibly can, is going to increase the number of folks who accept vaccination.
Okay, so for those employers out there, because folks are starting to go back to work, right, if they want to make it as convenient as possible, they just pick up the phone and call who to try to get that into where they are?
Well, right now that's not available. We don't have the clinic set up to go into the workplace, but I'm hopeful that that will be in the coming weeks to months. That again, we need to break down those barriers of ignorance. We need to break down those barriers of inconvenience. We really do need to work. There are some people who clearly have difficulty getting into a vaccine clinic. We need to be able to go to their homes and give that vaccine to them.
Are you hopeful that we can reach herd immunity?
Yes, I'm very hopeful that we will. And it's kind of a term that we toss around, but nobody knows exactly where that level is. Now, clearly, we have reached a tipping point in the United States where the amount of disease is coming down. But it's not zero by any means. Mm-hmm. And so we want to get it as close to zero as possible. That will occur as we get more and more people vaccinated, and then the virus just doesn't have vulnerable hosts to spread in and will extinguish. Now, this is not going to go away completely, so I don't want to give people the wrong idea that there's just some point where this is just going to disappear. There's really only one disease I know of that we've been able to do that with, and that's smallpox. Pretty much everything else is somewhere around the world. So we can get this, the pandemic curve down to the lowest possible level, turn this into a disease that is rare and treatable and one that we're able to deal with, rather than one that is threatening to really overwhelm our healthcare system.
Okay, thank you. We have 1 minute or so remaining. The CDC vaccination card, your vaccine card, tell us about that, the importance of that.
Well, people should get that vaccine card. It'd be great to just take a picture of it if you have a smartphone or some other way that you can document so that you can take it with you. There's no requirement that people show a vaccine passport in most parts of the United States, but I think there are going to be places where people will be asked to demonstrate proof of vaccination. That might be with international travel. It may be in certain states or localities where this is required. So I think that people would be well versed to go ahead, make sure they've got their documentation, and are able to present it when need comes. Okay,
talking today about fully vaccinated. Now what with Dr. Mark Rupp? We do have more information for folks who are looking for that, and we'll put that up now. Vaccines.gov, 1-800-232-0233, cdc.gov, dhhs.ne.gov, and nebraskamed.com. Dr. Rupp, thank you so much for being here today and for doing all that you have been doing, and you and your colleagues in the last year and a half, to keep us all safe and informed.
Well, I'm blessed to work with an incredible team at Nebraska Medicine, and thank you for having me on today.
We're blessed to have you. Thank you. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.